So first things first, what we're going to go over today is how do pistols work. Now for demonstrative purposes and just to clarify to the audience, everything here is unloaded. You can see that we don't want any danger in any of this. Always make sure your firearms are unloaded before you decide to mess around with them. Remember the 4 weapon safety rules. Treat every weapon as if it were loaded. Never point your weapon at anything you do not intend to shoot. Keep your finger straight and off trigger till you're ready to fire. And keep your weapon on safe until you intend to fire. So, with that being said, we have a Glock pistol and a M&P shield. Now, as far as the most commonly used and consistent out of the two, it's going to be your Glock. Reason being is that a Glock generally more accurate because it has a longer barrel, which I will get into later, compared to your shorter barrel of your M&P shield. It can also hold more rounds in the magazine than your M&P shield. M&P shield can hold 8 in the magazine and then 1 in the chamber. A Glock can hold anywhere from 10 plus 1 in the chamber on the low end to all the way up to 100, depending on the type of magazine that you have and what state you're in and regulations and all that jazz. Now with the Glock, there's a few things to take into consideration. Unlike your M&P shield, which has a safety right here, a Glock does not. A Glock does not have a manual safety like most firearms. A Glock only has a trigger safety, and that means that I close this, I decompress the trigger, and it goes off. Notice how I didn't have to switch any buttons or do anything? I'll do that again. Right here, press, and released. Now I will say with a Glock, you will have a trigger safety or a trigger disconnect. Essentially, if I were to, not sure if you can see it, but if I were to only press on the outside of the trigger, you hear that? It locks because my finger is not fully seated inside of the trigger to hear that click. That is very different than your M&P shield. Your M&P shield, on top of having a manual safety, it also has a magazine safety or a magazine disconnect. So on top of all that, what it also has is a trigger disconnect or trigger safety as well. So in total, this gun has 3 safeties compared to the Glock's only singular safety, which I wouldn't necessarily consider trigger disconnects as a huge safety, but they are there and they do their job, so I will give them the credit that they're due. With a M&P shield, and now most guns don't have this, but it's specifically for this handgun that I'm talking about, you can buy stuff like this where, like I said, a lot of people do buy Glocks. A lot of people are more afraid of Glocks because they only have the single trigger safety, and it is, I would say, a little bit more dangerous to have. But with the M&P shield or other similar guns to it, you can get all these kinds of safeties and everything. It's really just depending on you, shooter's preference, what do I want. So those are things to look at when even considering which handgun to purchase or which handgun to own. So back to what I was saying, with your M&P shield, you have 3 safeties. Now for this, for demonstrative purposes, I'm going to close the slide, and right here is my safety, right? My manual safety. Flip my manual safety off. Now listen for the click. It won't happen because there's no magazine inside. See? That's just the trigger moving. But once you add a magazine, there's that click. Now that's a cool thing about an M&P shield is that you have a magazine disconnect. A Glock does not have that, as we established before. No magazine. If I put this slide forward, pull the trigger, it would decompress and fire that round. So now that we've gone over different kinds of handguns and different kinds of safety mechanisms you'll see on handguns compared to other safety mechanisms you won't see at all compared to handguns. Now I want to go over how a handgun actually functions properly. And now, for sake of simplicity, I'm going to get rid of the M&P shield and strictly use just the Glock because, like I said, it is the most commonly used handgun. And now I want you to use your imagination here. A handgun will function like so. You're going to take your magazine, load rounds into it. You're going to take the magazine, load it into the bottom of the pistol. From this point, you will have this button right here. It is called a slide release. Every handgun, as long as it is not a revolver, will have a slide release on it. The M&P shield also has a slide release on it. Has your safety, your slide release, and then this is to disconnect the weapon and take it apart, so don't even worry about that. But again, your slide release will generally always be in the same location on every kind of handgun. Pretty much right above your magazine disconnect, because magazine disconnects or magazine releases are generally right here. So from this point, you would have a handgun like this. You'll hit your slide release. What this has now done is it has taken a round from the magazine, and since it has slid forward, it slides this round up and into the chamber. And now the chamber is sitting right here. So pretty much where this bullet is, exactly where a bullet would be sitting in your handgun. From this point, what I would do is obviously put my sights on the target and then pull the trigger. So now I have pulled the trigger. What would happen is that your trigger bar will disconnect from the firing pin sear, and the firing pin hits this back little disc right there in the center. That is called your primer. A primer, once it is struck, will create a mini explosion inside of your chamber because, again, the round is sitting right here. So a small explosion will go off inside your chamber, forcing the bullet to go down the barrel and out towards your target. I'm going to explain some real scientific stuff right now, so just bear with me. I want you to understand that barrel length matters when it comes to accuracy and the power that the round has itself. Now, there's a big misconception that, smaller barrels or the size of a barrel doesn't really matter. It actually matters a lot, for the reason being that unless you have a smooth bore weapon, which is, generally just a shotgun, which a lot of shotguns actually do have rifling in it, and rifling is this rotations and or spirals that are inside of the barrel that help the round spin. And now you're probably asking yourself, well, why do I want my round to spin? Well, physics. So as the round is traveling, if it was just traveling and not spinning, it would probably just get blown by the wind or just taken wherever and not be as accurate. But because it is a constant state of perpetual motion, the outside elements don't affect it as easily. And as it spins and it spins and it spins, the faster it spins, the more accurate it will be. So, how do we get more spins? Well, you create a longer barrel. The longer the barrel is, the more spin or the more rotations you will be able to accomplish getting onto every single round that you fire. That is generally why pistols, since they have a lot shorter barrel, will not go as far and will not be as accurate because the round has not had enough time to get to full velocity because of the short barrel. And now understand that when you fire a gun, the bullet is picking up speed inside of the chamber. Inside of the barrel. Once it leaves the barrel, it is no longer picking up any more speed. That is why pistols will not go as far is because the round has not had enough time to build up all that speed. With a longer barrel, like a rifle, it has a lot more speed behind it because all that pressure is building up and it's pushing the round even faster as it leaves the barrel. And on top of that, again, we have our rifling inside of our barrel, which is causing that round to spin really hard and spin really fast and be as accurate as possible. So now that I've just blown your minds with all that and how accuracy and handguns work and barrel length and size matters and all that junk, let me continue. So now that you have fired your round, you've compressed your trigger, the hammer has hit the firing pin has hit the primer, and your round is flying out of your barrel. What will happen then is pull the trigger, these slide. For demonstrative purposes, I'm going to take out my magazine because if you ever have an empty magazine, what's going to happen is it's just going to lock to the rear. It locks to the rear because it makes it a lot easier to reload from that position and slap in a new magazine and hit your slide release rather than slap in a magazine, have to recharge it. So I hope that makes sense. Now that my magazine is out of the weapon, we will continue. I have now decompressed my trigger, hammer, firing pin, primer, round out of the barrel. The slide itself will function as so. It will go back. As it goes back, it will again pick up another round and slide it into the chamber. Since it is now slid into the chamber, our system has just reset itself. And you will continue this same exact cycle over and over and over again until you run dry. Which upon then, you will obviously change your magazines. Changing your magazines is simple as such. Slide lock to the rear, magazine release, pull out your magazine. Magazine B goes in, slide release, boom, you're back in the fight. Simple as that. And again, it will pick up another round and slide it into the chamber, ready to go. So now you're probably asking yourself, well, why does all of this even matter? Why not just pick up a gun and shoot? Why do I need to learn any of this stuff? Well, it helps you as far as picking out a gun to buy yourself. Like I said, I've gone over a lot of different factors as far as just two handguns. And now, irregardless of size, the size of the hand grip and all that other stuff, the only size that actually matters, because they're both 9mm handguns, the only size that actually matters is probably your magazine capacities, your barrel length. Reason being is because, like I said before, barrel length makes a difference as far as power and accuracy. The longer your barrel is, the more accurate it's going to be. When you are thinking about purchasing a firearm yourself, you should always take into consideration factors of what am I getting this firearm for? The reason, now a lot of people are like, why would you get this handgun when you can get this handgun? Because this handgun holds a lot more. It's more accurate. It'll have a harder hitting punch even though they both fire the exact same round. Reason being is, check out how small this is compared to that. If I was to conceal carry a weapon every day, these are the factors I would like to consider. A big old Glock like this, yes, it's probably more accurate, has a little bit better of a punch, and can hold more rounds, but it's not as big, it's bulkier, it's easier for other people to see it when I'm concealed carrying, and it's, harder for me to just conceal carry. Now, obviously, I know a bunch of different people who love to conceal carry Glocks. I'm not saying Glock is a bad gun to conceal carry, but when you're making a comparison, I would argue that this would be better to conceal carry because it is more concealable. It is smaller, it's more compact, it's more comfortable, and comfort in uncomfortable situations matters. When you are considering to buy a handgun, something you would want to probably consider is, if I'm going to be having, because I like the appendix carry, if I have this weapon next towards my junk, do I really want a gun with no safeties or do I want a gun with more safeties? That just comes down to shooter's preference. Again, like I said, I know a bunch of people who conceal carry Glocks. They're absolutely cool with just having strictly just the trigger safety. For me, I'd like, my precious jewels to be a little bit more protected than that and, be a little bit more safe. So I got a gun with multiple different kinds of safeties on it. And these are both for me just in different application. I would use this more as far as, a pistol that I have on my kit. If I was doing mount or in a combat scenario, I'd rather have a Glock because there are no safeties that I have to mess around with before I can just pull the trigger. I just have to have a round in the chamber and then pull that trigger until she's empty. Different than this. This can also hold a lot more rounds than this. So it makes more sense if I was in a combat environment to have a Glock rather than an M&P shield. But if I was, in a regular civilian setting, I would say either both these work or my personal preference, I would have this just because, reasons. Personal reasons. Ultimately, when it comes down to buying a handgun or just buying any kind of gun, it's all about personal reasons. Now that I've gone over that and I've talked your ear off long enough, I hope this video has helped you out, at least as far as understanding how a handgun works, maybe things to consider when you're going to go purchase a handgun, and just anything in between. So with that being said, hope you enjoyed today's video, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace!